The hall smelled of metal and cold lights. It was larger than any place Leah Harrow had ever stood in. The ceiling arched high above like a blank sky. Strange voices echoed from many sides. Strange bodies watched from high chairs. Some had thin mouths. Some had too many eyes. All of them waited. Leah felt small behind the glass stand. Her uniform was plain. Her hands were steady, but her chest tightened. 10 years of training had led to this moment. Behind her, millions of people across Earth watched the feeds. Behind those millions, soldiers waited in secret rooms. Everyone wanted the same thing, peace. The translator unit at the stand hummed and turned alien tones into Earth languages. Leah read the words on the small screen before she spoke them. She had practiced them until they fit like a mask. She looked once at the image of Earth on the big screen. It hung there in blue and white, a small coin turning slowly. She thought of children playing under an open sky. She thought of markets and nights that were safe to walk in. She thought of how much pain one short line could stop. She took a breath. Her voice did not shake when she finally spoke. In the name of Earth, Leah said, we claim a single weapon. We will use it if attacked. We will not reveal its design. We will not trade it. We speak this to keep peace. A strange silence fell. The translator hummed, then stopped. High chairs shifted. A creature with glassy skin curled its fin over its mouth. A speaker on the council bench blinked slow colors. The chair at the center leaned forward and rang a bell-like sound. So be it, the central voice said at last. The council moved with careful rules. Borders were set. Trade lanes were opened. Ships would bear marks of safety. Earth would be protected from bombardment. The short sentence Leah had spoken had bought more than anyone had expected. For the first time in living memory, ships from other worlds came close without firing. Trade began. Scientists shared knowledge under tight terms. The sky felt like a friendly place. Earth celebrated. Leaders smiled in photographs. Children waved to cameras from playgrounds. Markets filled. For many, life changed overnight. Peace spread into corners that had known only fear. But not everyone smiled. In a dim room beneath the ministry, 3 people sat around a low table. The light was weak. The air tasted of old coffee and solder. Dr. Mendez held a cup that had gone cold. He had helped make parts of the thing they claimed to have. Yet his hands were empty. We are safe now, he said softly. He did not sound sure. The second man, long-fingered and scarred, shook his head. We said words we could not fully back. The council and the world believed. They always want a single line to settle fear. But someone will ask to see. Someone will test us. The third, a small woman with a voice like flint, put her palms on the table. Then we become the lie, she said. We learn to build what we said we had. We finish what we started. We make the mask real. They had no choice. The bargain had given safety. It had also pressed a weight onto Earth. That weight would not stay unseen. It would press on home, on industry, on simple lives. Laws would change. The councils of other species would want checks. Old machines would be outlawed as weapons. People who had once fixed harvesters would be called smugglers when they kept parts in a drawer. Outside the dim room, a small news feed showed Leah leaving the hall. Her face was calm on screen. She posed for the cameras. People cheered in squares. Traders toasted. A scientist in a coastal city watched the feeds with tired eyes. A father held a child and smiled. For most, peace had come like rain after drought. In the shadowed places, the 3 kept working. They had hidden designs. They had old blueprints and an unfinished prototype under layers of concrete and secrecy. Dr. Mendez opened a small metal box and took out a thin plate of coated parts. He laid it on the table as if it were a fragile map. "We will need time," he said. "We will make a story that fits the council's need to see a deterrent. We will not lie to the planet's people more than we already must. We will build slowly and carefully." The second man laughed once, a dry sound. "Slow builds die when governments need answers fast. They will point at the sky and ask. They will demand proof or they will test. A test can strip our peace away." Outside, someone on a dock looked up at a foreign ship and clenched his hands. Jalen had lost his brother in a border sweep 5 years before. He remembered the way soldiers had taken men and left empty beds. He had learned to read the new laws like a knife. The bargain had saved cities, but it had also sharpened rules that could cut simple lives. Leah stood alone for a moment on the balcony of the treaty hall. The stars beyond the glass were too many to count. She whispered a line to the wind, "We did what had to be done." Her words were quiet. Her heart kept a small, stubborn doubt. For now, the bargain held. The council smiled. Ships came and left with parcels and treaties. Earth walked under a lighter sky. Yet in basements and labs, the unfinished work moved forward. In markets and ports, rules tightened. The single sentence that bought peace had changed the world's shape. A lie had bought safety. Now the lie would ask something in return. It would ask people to bend, to hide, to build, and to become the echo of the words spoken in a great hall. The price had only just begun to count. Night fell like a curtain over the old port. Lanterns burned low and salt rode the air. Small boats creaked. Men and women moved like ghosts between crates and tarps. This part of the city had not changed much since before the bargain. It kept the things people wanted to hide. Jalen moved along the roof lines. He kept to the shadows. He knew the port by sound. A loose board, a dog that would bark twice, a chain that squeaked at high tide. He had come tonight for the usual, small parts, a sensor, a motor that might be fixed and sold to a farmer. That was how people survived here. That was how Jalen kept his home. He stopped above a stall where a lamp burned bright. A woman with a thin braid laughed with a buyer. They passed a wrapped box between them. Jalen recognized the shape. It could be used to measure wind. It could cut a line. In a world that watched the skies for threats, such a box might be called a weapon. A bell rang from the harbor. Jalen's breath caught. A ship slid into the dock. It did not carry flags or music. It moved like judgment. Men in the ship's light stepped down. They wore the council seal on their coats. Their boots made no sound on the wet wood. "Hands where we can see them," the main inspector said. His voice carried in a way that made the whole market still. He had an official badge and a face like a carved stone. He did not seem surprised to be there. No one ever looked surprised when the council came. Traders froze. Boxes were turned over. Jalen watched from the roof. He had no plan to fight. He had learned that fighting only made the council angrier. He had watched his brother leave years ago under a sweep and never return. The memory of that empty chair burned in him. The inspector read the law aloud. It was long and clear. Anything that could be used to harm or to hide harm was forbidden without council registration. Sellers must prove every part had civilian use. The traders tried to explain. Old motors were used in harvesters. Sensors helped fishermen find shoals. The inspector's face did not soften. He tapped a device and a drone hummed to life. Its cameras stared at the crowd. A woman stepped forward. Her voice shook. "We need to eat," she said. "My husband is sick." The mine closed. "This is all we have." She opened her hands. Her palms were cracked. The inspector looked at her with no pity. He pointed to a crate and said, "Take them. We will list them as evidence." Men were hauled from the stalls. Names were called and recorded. The drone wrote them down in a language that ran across its lenses like ink. Jalen felt something cold move inside him. He wanted to leap down and grab a box and run. He wanted to shout for mercy. He did none of these things. He waited until the guards had their backs turned. Then he slipped down the ladder. He moved like water. He took nothing that mattered. He only followed the path the inspectors had left. At the end of the pier, a crate moved into the inspector's ship. He saw the crate's mark, the council's ink. Inside would be a log. Inside would be names of buyers and sellers. Inside would be proof that would travel to judges and to the council's cold rooms. He should have left. He did not. He needed to know where the crate went. He needed to know what would happen to the people who had traded to feed their children. Far below, in a hidden bay, the three who had helped start the bargain watched the feeds. Dr. Mendez's face was haggard. The second man paced with cigarette ash falling. The woman with a small, hard voice touched the bench and did not speak. "They will take the small ones first," the second man said. "They always do. They send a warning. They make examples so others obey." Dr. Mendez tapped his fingers on a metal box. "We bought time with a sentence," he said. "Now we must buy more time with machines. People will look at this raid and think we can stop it by making the weapon real faster. They will demand proof. The council will demand tests." The woman's eyes were dark. "And tests break things. Tests force us to show what we do not yet have. They will see our unfinished work and decide it is not enough." Outside, the city slept under new lights. Traders closed their stalls with trembling hands. Mothers tucked children into beds and whispered old prayers. The bargain had made peace, but it had also given power to the watchers. Every small trade could be read as a lie. Every repaired motor might be a weapon. Jalen walked home with his hands in his pockets. He passed a poster that said, "Earth is safe." The poster showed Leah smiling beneath the council seal. Jalen spat on the ground. To him, safety had teeth. He found his neighbor's door open. Inside, men with plain coats took a box and spoke in low voices. The neighbor's wife stared with red eyes. "They say the parts were illegal," she whispered. "They say we kept weapons." Jalen felt the ember inside him grow. He thought of his brother's empty chair and of the way the inspector had read the law like a prayer. He thought of Dr. Mendez in his dark room, of blueprints that promised salvation and of laws that killed small lives. The peace the bargain built seemed to rest on fear that could swallow the poor. At the edge of the city, hidden beneath salt and concrete, the prototype moved. Men and women in rough coats worked in shifts. They put together pieces that meant little to anyone outside their circle. They soldered sensors and aligned lenses. They whispered like nurses around a bed. The work had to be perfect. If a test came, it would be the thing that kept thousands alive or the thing that ended the bargain forever. Myra checked a panel and frowned. The prototype answered with a small pulse. It was not ready. The lab smelled of solder and lemon tea and old fear. Myra thought of the council's drones and the inspector's voice. She thought of Jalen's markets and of Leah's calm face in the poster. Above all, she thought of the choice that was coming. The bargain bought safety with a lie. It had made rules that punished the weak. It had also given the few a terrible job, to become the weapon the world believed in. If they failed to finish it, the peace would shatter. Outside, a child cried in a small house. Inside, a man packed the last of his tools into a box and whispered he would go find work where laws were softer. The city breathed shallow and kept its secrets close. Jalen stood at his roof and watched the inspector's ship sail away. He felt small and furious. He touched the pendant that had belonged to his brother and made a decision he had once promised he would never make. He would not let the bargain take everything from the small. If the council's peace would break their backs, then something would break back. The ember inside him became a small fire. In the labs, under the streets, people worked faster. In the council rooms, men wrote new lists. The quiet had a price. The price was beginning to come due. Myra worked late. The lab lights were tired and low. Rain hit the roof in thin lines. She liked the rain. It made the city hush. It made code seem clearer. Her bench was cluttered with tools and coffee cups. A small machine blinked softly on the table. It was an old sensor they had once used to study storms. Myra had fixed hundreds like it. Tonight the sensor behaved wrong. It sent a single pulse and then nothing. The screen showed a number that did not fit the expected pattern. "Where did you come from?" she asked the empty room. The lab AI answered in its calm voice. "Legacy signature detected," it said. "Boot file flagged." Myra frowned. Legacy files were supposed to be erased. They were the old war things. When the bargain came, the council ordered many old programs deleted. People had turned some into art. Some had been lost. Now one called out like a small animal trapped in a storm drain. She wiped her hands on her coat and opened a drawer. Under old wires and expired parts, she found a thin drive wrapped in brown tape. There were stamps and faded letters on its casing. Myra held it like a fragile memory and plugged it in. The screen filled with lines she had not seen in years. The code felt rough and alive. It formed a diagram that crawled slowly into view. A shape of metal and light. A rim. A core. It was a map of a device the world said it might have but never showed. It was a part of the thing Leah had named in the council hall. Myra's chest tightened. She thought of Leah's calm face on the big screen. She thought of Dr. Mendez's cold coffee and the 3 people in the dim room who had agreed to a lie. She thought of Jalen in the port and the inspector taking boxes. The bargain kept them safe. It also kept secrets that could eat them. Her fingers shook when she brushed the code. The prototype on the bench hummed in a new tone. A single LED glowed like an eye. The old drive sent out a small ping into the lab net. It was so tiny that only old machines would notice. But the ping did not stop in the lab. It moved like a whisper through wires and under floors. Across the city, a monitoring node in the ministry felt a tiny rise. The node was set to ignore most things. It was not built to listen for ghosts. Still, a red dot blinked on its screen. The node logged the spike and sent it upward. Someone at a desk far away looked at the alert and frowned. Myra opened the schematic more. It had words that were half machine, half poem. Bootstrap, initiate if handshake received. The drive waited for a handshake. The lab AI spoke again. Attempted handshake detected from unknown source, it said. File requests, external check. Myra's phone buzzed. The screen showed a message, Council audit immediate. She felt a cold line run down her back. The council did not call without reason. Audits meant questions. Audits meant inspections. Audits meant tests. She could wipe the drive. She could smash it and burn the files. She could pretend she never saw anything. But the code in her head would not let her. She had tasted truth before. She had learned to love the small victories of fixing a sensor, of making something speak that the world thought dead. She could not erase a voice that asked to be heard. Myra did a thing that made her own hands afraid. She started a controlled boot of the code. She put the lab in a safe loop and watched the sequence. The prototype answered in pulses, like a heart finding a rhythm. A diagram shifted and became clearer. There were instructions for parts she did not have. There were control loops that matched nothing she had seen in modern designs. Then a line of text appeared that was not code. It was a question. A simple line that read, "Who is listening?" Myra's breath left her. Her chair creaked as she leaned back. She typed, hands faster than her mind. She wrote a single answer, humanity. The screen did not blink. It did something else. It opened a small window and played a voice that sounded like the lab AI but older. Kinder. Confirmed, it said. Connection accepted. At the ministry, the red dot became a small orange flare. Someone in a high room felt the rise. It matched a pattern from files the three had locked away. The files were old, incomplete, but the pattern was the same. The ministry sent a short encrypted line to Dr. Mendez's private relay. The message read, "Anomaly detected, origin unknown. Keep watch." In the lab, the prototype pushed more than files. It pushed a small packet into the city net. It asked for parts lists, for frequencies, for light signatures. It wanted to know if the city had the things to finish what it hinted at. Myra watched and felt both terror and a strange, painful hope. She knew the bargain's fault line had opened. The lie they had told in the Great Hall had cracks now. Something in metal language had found a seam and slipped a thread through. If the council heard first, they would demand to test and to punish. If someone else heard first, traitors, old warlords, species who traded in arms, they might take the thread and pull the world apart. Myra closed her laptop with a hard motion. Rain tapped the windows. The lab AI kept its calm voice. "Council audit incoming," it said, as if reminding her of a rule she could not change. She wrapped the drive and put it in her coat. She locked the lab and walked out into the night. The city smelled of wet stone and metal. Lights moved like watchful eyes. Somewhere, a far-off ship adjusted course like a hand feeling for a pulse. Myra thought of choices. She thought of the unfinished prototype under concrete and the men who kept it secret. She thought of Leah's steady words in the hall and of Jalen's small fire. The fault line opened, and it would not close on its own. Somewhere in the dark, something older woke a little more. It had heard the answer, humanity. It was waiting to see what humanity would say next. The clip was short and raw. A shaky hand, a table, and a voice that trembled. Someone filmed an old room. The light was poor. Hands moved over papers. The camera caught a signature and a face that did not belong to any official feed. "We were told to say it," the voice said. "We were told to protect them." The clip ended with a small laugh that sounded like fear. It spread fast. Channels took it up. People shared it with hungry thumbs. The council's calm mask cracked on screens across the world. Traders paused. Markets dipped. The envoy's ship that had hovered like a promise now moved like a question. Leah watched the clip 3 times. It showed the bargain room from an angle she never saw. It showed a hand she thought might be Dr. Mendez's. The image was grainy, but one thing was clear: someone had filmed what the public had been kept from seeing. The council replied with silence at first. Then the envoy arrived. Its ship lowered over the capital like a slow shadow. It did not announce itself with music. It landed with a polite sound, like a closed book. From it walked an envoy in a coat of pale metal. Its face was not cruel. It was the kind of face that felt reason like a blade. "Prove," the envoy said simply when the world watched. "We ask to see what protects you. We ask for proof. If you do not, we will test. If you lie, we will act." The city held its breath. The markets emptied. People gathered in squares and watched screens. Voices rose in uneasy chorus. Some said show them the weapon. Some said never show them because testing could mean losing everything. In a small room under the ministry, the 3 sat and watched the ship. Dr. Mendez leaned forward. His hands were warm from a cup of tea he had not finished. The second man kept quiet, his jaw tight. The small woman touched the old table as if it were the edge of a cliff. "We can make a proof," Dr. Mendez said. "We can build a thing that looks like what we claimed. Enough to stop tests. Enough to satisfy the envoy." His voice was quick with hope and fear. The woman's eyes were hard. "A staged proof only buys time," she said. "It does not end the truth." Sooner or later, someone will look closer. A fake will crumble under pressure. We have no time to wait for a perfect truth, the second man said. People want safety now. The envoy wants proof now. The council will back us if we meet the test. They will crush us if we fail. Outside, Jalen moved through crowds that smelled of burnt food and worry. He heard people debating. A news anchor called for calm. A group of young students chanted for truth. Old men argued that any test would expose more than lies. The city felt thin like a drum skin stretched over too many things. A journalist named Kiri held a fragment of another story. She had hacked through feeds and found a hidden recording of the bargain room. She had not meant to make it public. Her note said, "Think first." But someone else had taken the file and leaked it. Now Kiri watched her work run like wildfire and could not pull it back. She called a contact. "Who did this?" she asked. The answer was a name she did not expect, an intermediary species known in trade for moving things no one wanted to ask about. They used silence like a tool. They trafficked in secrets. Kiri's face grew pale. They profit from fear, she told herself. If fear grows, their business grows. At the ministry, a new problem arrived. A probe in low orbit sent a simple message, "Request demonstration." The envoy wanted a direct test. It would not be a small test. It would be thorough. It would be watched. It would have rules that made room for failure. Dr. Mendez stood. He paced and then stopped. "We can stage something," he said again. "Not the full weapon. Not the instant destroyer. But something that shows capability. A controlled display. A defensive act that looks like offense." The small woman looked at him and then at Myra, who had come down from the lab. Myra carried the thin drive in her coat and did not say it out loud, but the drive's code ticked at the edge of their plan like a second heartbeat. "We have a prototype," she said. "Not finished. It can act as a shell. It can do a defensive demonstration that looks dangerous. It might be enough." They argued through the night. They argued with maps and parts lists. Leah argued for caution. Jalen argued for truth. Myra argued for speed and stealth. The second man argued for a plan that would keep people alive even if it failed. Near dawn, a plan formed. They would present the prototype as a something dangerous. They would stage a demonstration in which the prototype intercepted a falling council test object in a way that seemed capable of destruction. They would not show an instant killer. They would show restraint and ability to strike and stop. The envoy liked rules. The envoy respected restraint. On the ship of the intermediary species, far from human ears, someone smiled. The leak had done its work. Traders moved in corridors, whispering about price shifts and new demand. Secrets turned into coin. Fear had a market, and the market smelled profit. Kiri sent a final note to a friend, "Be careful." She did not know which side would listen first, the council, the public, or the traders. She only knew that once the demonstration happened, the world would change in ways no single reporter could hold. The envoy set a test window. The city read the hours in a new way. People made choices in the shadow of a ship that wanted proof. The prototype was hurried into place beneath thick concrete. Myra checked its lines until her fingers ached. Dr. Mendez watched the news feeds with a face like a struck bell. Jalen moved through alleys asking favors and debts. Leah stood on the balcony of the treaty hall and watched the envoy's pale light wash the streets. Outside, the intermediary species moved goods and leaned on the edges of rumor. They had profit to make if fear rose. They did not care what truth lived under the masks. They only cared that the city would pay for quiet and that quiet would feed their ships. When the test day came, the city would be watching. The envoy would have rules and witnesses. The council would watch its power. Traders would watch pain and profit. And the three who sat under the ministry would try to show a thing that would hold the world steady for one more breath. But the leak had done more than force a test. It had shown that others could touch the bargain strings. Anyone who could move a video could move a market. Anyone who felt profit in fear could widen the crack. The demonstration might save the peace. It might also show every hand that could pull on the city. The world waited. The leak had been only the first voice. Now other voices pressed close. The capital smelled of coffee and hot ink. Flags hung quiet. The envoy's pale ship filled the sky like a coin held to the sun. On the square, people gathered. Screens played the same calm face of the envoy that asked for proof. The city moved in slow, nervous steps. Inside the ministry, 5 people sat in a ring that felt too small for the choice before them. Leah looked tired but steady. Myra had her drive tucked in a pocket. Jalen's jaw worked like a hinge. Dr. Mendez rubbed his temple. The second man watched everyone and said little. "You have 1 hour," the envoy had said. 1 hour to prove your claim or accept our inspection. They had not wanted a public test. They had wanted time. But the leak had burned that path. The envoy wanted demonstration with witnesses. The world would see everything. They set the demo outside the city on a small island where tests would cause the least harm. The plan was precise. The prototype would act as a shell. It would not show an instant killer. It would show control. It would catch, deflect, or shield. The message had to be clear: Earth could stop a strike and could keep the sky safe. At dawn, the convoy left. Jalen rode in a small truck with tools and a face that did not match the hope in his chest. Myra carried the thin drive like a talisman. Dr. Mendez walked with slow steps, as if the ground might shift. Leah drove the last leg. The city watched their screens like a held breath. The envoy's probe would drop a test object. It would be harmless if handled like a toy. In the hands of an enemy, a thing like that could be dangerous. The envoy wanted to see response time, control, and restraint. They set the prototype on a low pad. It looked like a ring of metal and glass. The shell they had built hid the truth underneath. Sensors blinked. Wires slept like coiled snakes. The prototype's small core shivered awake when Myra fed it the drive's handshake. Code spun. A soft hum began like the first call of a huge, sleeping beast. Crowds watched the feed from screens far away. Traders and diplomats and children sat in the same cold light. The envoy's camera floated in orbit. Judges from 3 species would watch. The world counted seconds like coins. The probe dropped. It fell in a bright line. For a moment the sky held a straight white thread and the world held a straight line of fear. The prototype moved first. Not with a flash, but like a net thrown by a hand that had practiced for years. Fields of light unrolled. The falling object hit the field. A shudder ran through the pad. Then something no one had promised happened. The shell did not cut. It did not break. It wrapped. The object slowed as if the air itself had thickened. The shell guided the object outward in a gentle arc away from the island and toward a remote reef where no people lived. Where the world had expected destruction, the prototype had shown control and mercy. The envoy's face showed nothing. Its voice was even. "Impressive control," it said. "A device that can redirect is not the instant kill you claimed. It is, however, a capability that can end or save. We will record this demonstration for review." A murmur ran through the crowds. Some cheered. Others scowled. Traders took notes. The intermediary species that had leaked footage smiled in their corridors. Profit moved in small whispers. On the island, Leah felt relief like a small hot thing in her chest. She watched the replay and saw children in a far city applaud on a screen. Jalen let out a long breath he did not know he had been holding. Dr. Mendez's hands trembled but he did not break. Myra touched the drive and thought of all the lines of code that had turned into that field of light. Yet the peace was not won by applause. The envoy did not sign a treaty that day. It issued conditions. It asked for oversight. It demanded that certain tests be open to their inspectors. It wanted a council registry for specific technologies. It asked Earth to accept observers in working groups. The envoy spoke of trust measured in visits and proofs. Some of those demands felt like chains. People in the city protested. They waved signs that read, "Not a prison." Others celebrated. Traders made deals. The Council of Species would draft new rules. The bargain had changed shape. It would no longer be a single whispered sentence that bought silence. The bargain would be worked into rules, into oversight, into a slow, public trust. Kiri, the journalist, watched the envoy's terms and wrote fast. She wrote of human courage and human lies. She wrote of a people who had once bought peace with words and now tried to earn it with hands. Her peace would travel to many systems. It would be read by children and judges and traders. Far away, the intermediary species adjusted their ledgers. They had widened the crack. They had watched it become business. They would now watch if the new rules made their profits smaller or larger. Back in the ministry, the five sat again. The second man lit a cigarette and said, "We changed the story. We did not end the dead." His voice had a tired humor. "They will want more proof. They will ask for access to our programs, our labs. They will talk about spies and inspectors." Myra shook her head. "Maybe sharing some work will be better than hiding everything," she said quietly. "At least then we guide the truth instead of begging it." Jalen looked at the city from a high window. He had seen men taken for small parts. He had felt the law like a blade. He had thought revenge. Now he saw a new path. The bargain had been a lie that bought peace. The demonstration had been a small truth that asked for trust. People would bargain again, but with new eyes. The envoy left with lists and questions. The council would meet. Traders would whisper. The city would sleep under a sky that was no longer simply friendly. It would be watchful. In a small room under the ministry, they began to write up a new plan. Not a single sentence in a great hall this time. Not a mask. They would open small doors. They would allow inspectors in controlled ways. They would publish parts of the prototype as civilian tech that could help rebuild cities and shield harbors. They would admit what they had done and the limits of what they had built. The bargain had been rewritten, but it was messy. It asked for compromise, for proof, for hard work. It would cost trade-offs. It would cost privacy. It might cost lives if tests failed later. Yet it also gave something the old lie never could, a chance to be trusted. Leah walked to the balcony and watched the stars. She whispered not to the wind but to herself, "We bought peace once with a lie. Today we tried to pay for it with our hands." She did not know if the galaxy would forgive the lie. She only knew that for now, Earth had stood and that standing had changed them. Somewhere, in a dock with faded lamps, Jalen put his hand on the pendant that used to belong to his brother. He felt a small warmth and then firmness. He had once wanted the bargain to break the way it had broken others. Now he wanted to help build what came after. The bargain would be written again and again. Humanity had learned one last lesson: peace bought by words would not last. Peace earned would be harder, slower, and more human.